Sounds strange, doesn't it? But in recent years, more and more scenarios about Canada joining the European Union have been discussed. But why would Canada want to make such a move? And is it really possible?
So let's turn to Canada because the new Prime Minister is expected to announce a snap election. He has been visiting the country's Governor General.
Okay, we begin in Washington, where President Donald Trump is uttering more threats against Canada and talking about who should run Canada.
America is not Canada. And Canada never, ever will be part of America in any way.
Today, we will look at possible scenarios for Canada's accession to the EU. We will discuss the economic and political effects, the impact on the global balance of power, and how Canadians view the idea. Is Canada preparing to become the 28th member of the EU? Let's get started. Why might Canada want to join the EU? At first glance, the idea may seem outlandish. After all, Canada is a strong economy, has vast natural resources, and relies on close trade ties with the US. However, Canada has long-established ties with Europe. Universal healthcare, bilingualism, and ties to the monarchy make it the most European North American country. In recent years, strained relations with Washington have accelerated Canada's search for new commercial and strategic partnerships. The EU stands out as a strong economic bloc for Canada. Free trade agreements, customs advantages, and greater market access are among the factors driving Ottawa's interest in the EU. Canada's desire to move closer to Europe did not arise by chance. Tariffs, diplomatic rifts, and Arctic tensions with the United States, especially during Donald Trump's presidency, have prompted Ottawa to seek new partners. The European Union, with its size, value system, and economic stability, became an attractive destination for Canada. After years of close contacts with Brussels thanks to the Free Trade Agreement, CETA, Ottawa is now asking aloud, is more possible? While some criticize it as a blow to sovereignty, supporters argue that it is safer to integrate strongly with Europe than to be alone in the world. Canada's accession to the European Union could also be an important move for the EU. The EU, which has lost a major economic player, especially after Brexit, could create a new powerhouse in transatlantic trade. Canada, with its energy resources and defense sector, could be a critical player in areas that the EU needs. In particular, Canada could play a major role in Europe's new plans to increase defense spending. Under the new $150 billion defense fund, member states are encouraged to purchase a certain percentage of weapons. Canada could strengthen the EU's arms industry with its technological and industrial capacity in this field. Another reason for Canada's orientation towards the EU is its relations with the US. Especially under Donald Trump, US trade policies have been challenging for Canada. Trump's desire to make Canada the 51st state and trade wars caused Ottawa to seek alternative partnerships. New Prime Minister Mark Carney's first visit to Paris and London after his inauguration, instead of the US, is interpreted as a sign of Canada's direction. In his speech in France, he emphasized that Canada is the most European country outside the continent. But Canada has not completely abandoned the United States. It remains committed to NATO and is actively participating in European-backed missions in Ukraine. It is, however, on the brink of a trade war with Washington and is seeking closer economic ties with the EU. At the root of this approach is Canada's desire to reduce its dependence on the United States. Most of the country's exports still go to its neighbor. The recent trade wars with Washington and disagreements over defense spending are fueling the idea of why not look elsewhere. As new Prime Minister Mark Carney has said, we need to be able to make independent decisions in a multipolar world. The US is not the only option. His words seem to be the official signal of a turn towards Europe. Especially after Trump's tariffs and protectionist moves shook the backbone of the Canadian economy, Ottawa has embraced the idea that we must find alternatives to the big market. But how can Canada, a country that has been out of the shadow of European colonies for hundreds of years and integrated with the United States on a north-south axis, be interested in connecting across the Atlantic to Brussels? The answer to this question is based on realpolitik rather than history and emotion. First, if Canada joins the EU, it will have full access to the European market, expanding the scope of duty-free trade. Second, it would be able to step out of the US shadow in defense and foreign policy and become a partner in Europe's rearmament projects. Europe is interested in a different alliance model in the post-NATO era and is interested in Canada's energy resources and technical expertise. For a long time, EU countries have been trying to reduce their dependence on foreign energy, in part due to tensions with Russia. Canada is a strong supplier of energy and minerals. In this way, the two sides' interests overlap. Recent polls show interesting results when it comes to how this idea is received by the public. Around 40–50% say yes, joining the European Union would give us more options. Young people and those living in large cities are particularly interested in sharing cultural and political values with Europe. Canada has a kind of European identity and shares a modern welfare state, they say. Opponents cite reasons such as loss of sovereignty, geographical distance, and internal problems within the EU. There is no clear majority, but the very fact that this issue is being seriously discussed is a big change in itself. Is Canada's EU membership realistic? While the idea sounds interesting in theory, in practice there are serious obstacles. Article 49 of the Treaty on European Union states that only European states can apply for membership. But there is no precise definition of this term. In March 2025, Paula Pinho, spokesperson for European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, said in a statement that they were honored that the poll results in Canada showed the attractiveness of the EU. But referring to Article 49, she said Canada was not geographically located in Europe and therefore could not apply. Canada is geographically located in North America, which is an obstacle for Canada's EU membership. However, a 1992 document by the Commission of the European Communities states that European identity is not just about geographical location. According to the document, proximity, common ideas, values, and historical interaction should also be taken into account. In this context, another reference point for EU membership is the Council of Europe. According to Peter van Elsewege, professor of EU law at Ghent University, the fact that the Council of Europe is open only to European states is an important criterion for determining the geographical boundaries of the EU. But Canada is not a member of the Council of Europe. Has any non-European country ever applied to join the EU? Non-continental European countries have requested to join the EU before, and even eventually did so. Southern Cyprus, culturally and politically European, but geographically located in West Asia, became a full member of the EU in 2004. Turkey is an official EU candidate country, although accession negotiations have been stalled for years. Morocco applied to join in 1987 but was rejected because it was not a European country. According to van Elsewege, one of the biggest obstacles to joining the EU is that, unlike Cyprus and Turkey, Morocco and Canada are not members of the Council of Europe. Van Elsewege noted that the situation is fundamentally different for Cyprus and Turkey. In the former, the European Commission decided that Southern Cyprus's role in the development of European culture and civilization, as well as its close cultural, political, and economic ties with the rest of the continent, made the application admissible. Geography and history, on the other hand, play a role in Turkey being considered a European state. This was already the case in the association agreement signed between the European Economic Community and Turkey in 1963, which referred to a possible future membership application by Turkey. Van Elsewege said, thus, Southern Cyprus and Turkey are very specific cases that cannot be seen as precedents to conclude that Canada could potentially be considered a European state under Article 49. The most likely conclusion is therefore that Canada cannot legally join the EU because it is not culturally, politically, or geographically European. And therefore, a hypothetical Canadian application would require a legal review of the treaties. On the other hand, research shows that Canadians are undecided about joining the European Union. Opinions are split both positively and negatively. While 44% of Canadians think the government should definitely or probably consider EU membership, 34% are opposed. 1 in 4 are undecided. So why should Canada join the EU? The answer to this question is not only about Canada's own interests, but also about strategic goals around the world. Joining the EU would allow Canada to play a stronger role in international affairs. In addition, developing joint projects with the EU could help Canada stay at the forefront of environmental and technological developments. At the same time, the EU's strong foreign policy and security strategies can help Canada become a more influential player in the global arena. Accession to the EU could create new opportunities for Canada. At the same time, security concerns are growing in Europe, and the process of rearmament is accelerating. This could present a strategic opportunity for Canada. While NATO membership provides Canada with an important security guarantee, a deeper alliance with the European Union may be in Canada's security and economic interests in the post-NATO era. Canada is a global power in terms of energy and natural resources. Europe needs to strengthen its defense industry and reduce its energy dependence on Russia. Europe relies on the United States for most of its liquefied natural gas, LNG, but Washington's policies make this supply risky. Canada could be a reliable energy partner for Europe. Canadian Foreign Minister Mélanie Joly confirmed that Canada is in talks with Europe on defense cooperation, saying, "We need to work more closely with Europe on defense procurement." Christian Leuprecht of the Royal Military College of Canada and Queen's University emphasized that Canada needs to make a concrete offer to Europe. The biggest risk for Canada has always been to stand alone. If Europe takes on its own defense, the need for Canada will diminish. While US foreign policy is rapidly changing, European leaders are taking steps to strengthen the collective defense of their continent. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced a massive mobilization to rearm Europe. French President Emmanuel Macron said, "I believe that the United States will stay by our side, but we must still be prepared." The UK also seems eager to join this new alliance. Prime Minister Keir Starmer said Europe must continue to defend Ukraine. With NATO's future uncertain, Europe is looking for new security partners. However, it is still unclear how Canada will fit into this alliance. At the same time, the possibility of Canada increasing its military cooperation with Europe is being discussed. German politician Roderick Kiesewetter noted that Canada is critical for Europe as a reliable energy supplier. Buying fossil fuels and LNG from Canada is much better than importing energy from Russia. If Europe and Canada cooperate, it's mutually beneficial. But there is a major obstacle: lack of infrastructure. Canada does not have enough pipeline and port infrastructure to increase energy shipments to Europe. Joint investments and European financial support could be the solution. Canada can also contribute militarily to Europe. Leuprecht says, Canada can provide a safe training ground for European forces. It could also play a strategic role in the production of ammunition and military equipment. The war in Ukraine has shown that Europe needs to strengthen its defense industry quickly. Europe is investing in air and missile defense systems, but it is difficult to ensure complete protection. This is where Canada can be an important partner in the supply of critical minerals and defense technology. Canada's effort to strengthen its relationship with the European Union is not limited to the economic and trade spheres, but also involves a new orientation in terms of defense strategies. Seeking to reduce its defense dependence on the United States, Canada aims to establish closer cooperation with the EU and establish alternative sources of supply. In this context, the Canadian government is in talks to procure defense equipment, especially fighter jets, in Europe. A senior Canadian government official stated that the country is considering purchasing fighter jets from Europe to strengthen its defense industry and plans to increase local production capacity. Defense Minister Bill Blair announced that Canada is looking at alternatives such as Sweden's Saab Gripen, while maintaining its existing F-35 deal with the United States. Saab offers Canada the opportunity to assemble Gripen aircraft locally and carry out maintenance in the country. With such options, Canada aims to increase both its economic and strategic independence by diversifying its defense procurement. On the other hand, the European Union recently announced a new security strategy for 2030. This strategy encourages EU countries to outsource more of their military spending to European suppliers. Under the new regulations, EU countries will have to make at least 65% of their defense purchases from producers in the EU, Norway, or Ukraine. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has been closely following these developments in Europe and has been meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Canada's desire to cooperate with the EU in the field of defense is in line with Europe's moves towards strategic autonomy. Relations with the US are also carefully managed in this process. Although Canada has not completely ended its military cooperation with the US, it continues to take steps to strengthen its Europe-based defense industry. For example, Canada recently announced that it will purchase radar systems from Australia, showing that it is diversifying its defense cooperation not only with Europe, but also with the Indo-Pacific region. This new direction in defense procurement is seen as part of Canada's effort to reshape its international alliances in a balanced way. Canada's accession to the European Union has the potential to reshape not only an economic union, but also global security and strategic cooperation. Although geographical barriers and the EU's historical membership criteria are major obstacles on this path, the rapprochement between Canada and Europe could have important consequences on the world stage. Canada's strategic moves could herald an era that will affect the global balance. Both Canadians and the world will eagerly follow the roadmap that will be drawn in the coming years. After all, until recently, the question, will Canada join the EU, seemed so far-fetched as to be unthinkable. Today, it has turned into an option that receives serious support in opinion polls, is discussed in the media, and whispered about in political lobbies. Even if it continues to seem far-fetched, no scenario should be completely excluded in this era of shifting global balance. So what do you think? Can Canada break out of the US shadow, cross the Atlantic, and join the EU? Or will geography and politics destroy this dream? Share your thoughts in the comments. You can support us by subscribing to our channel and turning on notifications. Thank you for watching us.